All right, we be recording now for our, I think this is our third session, fourth session, third. We've done our practice with input-output functions last week, and now we're doing output limiting compression, OLC, versus wide dynamic range compression. We've done the input-output functions and kind of gathered how to read them and what to do with them. Now it's time to kind of apply them to the two main types of compression that we have, OLC and WDRC. And I'm going to share screen here and pull up the notes and see exactly where we are. I'll close this guy because we don't need that quiz anymore up here. Look at what we're doing. Compression in general. I'm highlighting this so that we realize why we've got it in the first place. Always keeping step with that. Compression is often called automatic gain control, AGC. It's usually just called compression now, but it used to be called AGC a lot, and that just meant the gain wasn't sheerly linear. It meant the gain changed. It gave some greater gain at some input levels and less gain at other input levels. Remember, input plus gain is output. So with compression, you're getting different amounts of gain for different input levels. And let's just pull up the PowerPoint so we can see what I mean. Here, I'll pull up this slide. You're getting linear gain for all these inputs. Watch here. Here's my cursor from 0 up to 60. I'm getting linear gain, but then I'm getting from 60 onward, I'm getting a different amount of gain because the gain line changed from 45. It went like that. It tilted. So this is compression area right here. This is where the hearing aid is giving compression. That's what they meant by automatic gain control. Different gain for different inputs. The whole purpose behind compression was is to enable a bigger dynamic range to fit into a smaller one. So remember, sensory neural loss, the floor is up. And I'll stop sharing so we really look at that and focus and concentrate big time. The loudness tolerance here, the floor goes up. The person can't hear at 0. The person can only hear at 50. Yet the UCL is maybe 100. So that never changed. Okay? So you're trying to fit a big dynamic range from 0 to 100 decibels, and you're trying to fit that into a person who's got a smaller dynamic range, someone who's standing on a table in the room, but yet the ceiling hasn't changed. So you're trying to fit a bigger dynamic range into a smaller one. Share screen. See if I got the picture of that on the good old PowerPoints. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But nonetheless, basically, let's see. No, I don't, but no matter. Not the end of the world. Okay, reading in your Microsoft Word notes again. Sensory neural loss has reduced dynamic range, so you cannot mirror an audiogram with full linear gain. With sensory neural loss, the ceiling is the same, but the floor is elevated. Oh, that's what it's all about. Maybe if I try and pull up, for example, let's see if I try and pull up, for example, here, another, a different, see if I can pull this over here, and I'll go up and see if I can get into our very first session where we looked at linear versus compression, and I might be able to highlight that diagram for us again, because it is rather important, just for us to really see this. Well, it's not even, oh yeah, here you go. This is one way to look at it. Here's your typical way of looking at it. There you go. Look at this picture here. Normal dynamic range, great big. Sensory neural loss on the right, smaller. Notice the UCL is the same on both of these audiograms. It's the thresholds that have changed, which is why the audiogram is such a silly graph, because more goes down instead of up. So using the analogy like this with my hands is kind of backwards on the audiogram, but you see what I mean. Here's another way of looking at it. Normal dynamic range, reduced dynamic range on the right. Per normal from 0 up to 120, and reduced from 50 or 60 up to 120. And I guess that's the main thing that we really want to highlight. Here's another way of looking at it. Even in terms of the loudness contours, The guy's audiogram goes down, so his floor is elevated, but his loudness ceiling is not. Essentially, that's the gist of it. So back to the other PowerPoint, here we go. And back to our notes. All right, input versus output compression. Now, don't get freaked about this, because today's digital hearing aids just don't use this, okay? They use it, but it happens automatically. But the reason I put it on there is, again, kind of practice with reading input-output functions. More of an issue on yesterday's analog hearing aids. Today's digital hearing aids handle this automatically. Not really necessary for this course to cover this topic, but reading this helps to internalize input-output functions and how they are read. Last week's topic. In analog hearing aids, input or output compression is determined by where the volume control sat in the circuit. Don't worry, I'm never going to ask you this on a quiz or a test. But output compression, just so we can read the picture together, and now as students you'll probably be able to get this. Watch. We'll go to this particular picture here, and we'll pull up input and output compression. Here you go. Take a peek-see at this. Left, output compression. Right, input compression. And now, knowing how to read input-output graphs, you can tell look what it says on the picture here, volume control effects. That's what input versus output compression concerned. That's what it dealt with. So if the user increased or decreased volume control on his or her hearing aid, output compression, the volume control changed the gain. You can see that, 3 gain lines, volume control max, volume control minimum, but it didn't change the maximum power output, didn't change the MPO. So this was really useful on high power hearing aids. So the user, you would set the maximum power output because you're the clinician. You would base the MPO on the client's uncomfortable loudness level. And we said last week, how much would you add to that? Oh, around 15 or so. If the guy's UCL was 100, you might choose an MPO of 115 or 120. You'd set it. Okay, now the client can change the volume control till the cows come home, but it's not going to alter the maximum power output that the hearing aid can do. It'll change the gain. And we recall from last week, the leftmost gain line is the most. The rightmost gain line is the least. And follow me here and you'll see what I mean. Look at my cursor. Look where my cursor is, right on the black line here. With minimum volume control, I get this output. Okay? With maximum volume control, I need this input to give me almost the same output. See, with volume control minimum, I need a buku input to give me yay amount of output. If I turn up the volume, I need way less input to give me almost the same output. And again, just let the graph tell the story. Don't worry about this stuff on the bottom, who cares? Input compression meant that when the volume control was increased, not only did the gain change, but also the MPO changed. They both changed together. Weird. Oh. This is looking at it as a frequency response. And you people have taken ANSI testing, OSPL90. What's the MPO of the hearing aid? What's the maximum output? Output compression, as seen not on input-output functions. Let's look at frequency response. So here's frequency on the horizontal and decibels on the vertical. And with output compression, the volume control changed your gain, but it didn't change your maximum power output, it left it alone. Input compression, your volume control changed not only your gain, but it also changed your maximum power output. So there's, again, the 2 languages by which to read hearing aids. This is Polish, this might be German, okay? This is input-output functions, where the frequency is understood to be 2000 hertz, remember? Whereas here's frequency responses telling the same story, just in a different language. All right. That's all we really want to kind of talk about regarding input-output compression. Scroll down. Don't worry about this stuff too much. It really doesn't matter. Okay, just kind of leave that stuff alone. Not to freak about it, because today it really isn't used. We don't, you know what it is? I'll tell you something. In the old days, clinicians had to choose, do you want the hearing aid to be input compression or do you want the hearing aid to be output compression? Which type do you want? Because the analog hearing aid was either one type or the analog hearing aid was the other type. And you ordered the wrong hearing aid, ah, shoot. I got to send it back and now I got to order the right one. So it used to be really important for clinicians to really understand the difference between input and output compression. Hang on, I'm going to turn a light off down in this room. It's kind of a little bright. I don't know, I'm finding it too weird on me. Anyway, so in the old days, hearing aids were either one or the other. Today's digital hearing aids are digital. So with soft inputs, they'll use input AGCI. With loud inputs, they'll automatically go to the other type of compression. Meaning, with soft inputs, if you change the volume on the hearing aid, the gain and the MPO would both go up together. As the inputs got louder and louder, if you change the volume control, only the gain would change, not the output. Today's hearing aids handle it automatically. Done. Leave the topic alone. Freak not out. Let's look at the bottom part of page 1. Go to output limiting versus WDRC over here. Okay? Scroll down. Always remember, output limiting compression, it handles the ceiling. WDRC handles the floor. That's the main two camps of compression. Look at it this way. Output limiting compression handles the loud stuff, loud inputs. It governs the maximum power output. The focus is on controlling the maximum power output of the hearing aid. So the concern here is not causing more hearing loss because of the hearing aid. That's the territory of concern with output limiting compression. That would be the Homeland Security of OLC, is protecting the listener from further hearing loss due to too much loudness of the hearing aid. When you're thinking of OLC, output limiting, think high and high. High knee point, high compression ratio. The hearing aid doesn't go into compression until the input's at least conversational speech or louder. And then the compression ratio is high. So here we go. Let's look at a picture. Move on down. Here. Output limiting compression on the left. Have a peek here. Here's its input-output function. High knee point, high compression ratio. Usually OLC is done for high power hearing aids. It's a concern for people with severe hearing loss. You really want to make sure that you're protecting that listener because he's got high power hearing aids on. If you look at the right, there's WDRC. You can see it's got a low knee point and a low ratio of compression. What do I mean by low? Less than 4:1. Less than 4:1. High knee point or high compression ratio, greater than 4:1. But look at here too. Look at how 2:1 has a real gentle slope to it. I mean, it's barely any, it's from linear to 2:1. Okay, you've changed. So let's look at how this goes again to make sure we understand from last week. On the right, 0 in, 40 out. 20 in, 60 out. 40 in, 80 out. The gain is 40. So you can tell it's a weaker hearing aid. It's not a high power hearing aid. It's only giving you a gain of 40. A gain of 40 isn't that much. A gain of 60 is quite a bit. A gain of 80 is about the maximum gain you'll ever see on a hearing aid. You know why? And I'll stop sharing screen here. Think about it. 80 decibels of gain. Remember, input plus gain is output. So how much input plus 80 is going to yield too much output? I mean, 20 in plus 80 gain is 100 out. My God, you're already, yikes, 30 in plus 80 gain is 110 out. Okay, people can handle that. Okay, 40 in plus 80, 120 out. Yikes, now you have to start limiting. Yeah, okay, so gain of a hearing aid is almost never more than 80. 80 is a high power mother hearing aid. It's a transport truck. 60 is a fair bit of gain. It's quite a bit. 40, 30. You know, hearing aids don't have to. Look at someone with mild to moderate sensory neural loss, sloping down to about 50 or 60 dB. That person's barely getting like 30 dB of gain. You don't need much. Because remember, did you take hearing aid fitting methods yet? You took hearing aid fitting methods, right? 150? Hearing aid fitting methods. What were they all based on? The half gain rule. Half gain. Because input plus gain is output. So if you have a hearing loss of, say, 60 dB, you're not going to want to give all that much gain. Because for speech, you're going to want to give half the gain of half the loss back. Think about it. Think of someone with a 60 dB hearing loss. What's the input of speech? About 60. Okay, so 65 dB SPL. Look at it in dBHL, just for fun. In dBHL, average speech is between 50 or 60 dBHL. In SPL, average speech is between 60 and 70 dB SPL. Okay? Memorize those numbers. It's really important. On an audiogram, in dBHL, average speech is 50 to 60. When you're talking SPL, average speech is 60 to 70. Just good handles to have, okay? Let's go back to dBHL now. Let's say the guy has a 60 decibel hearing loss. If you're going to add 60 decibels of gain to compensate for that 60 decibels of hearing loss, well, what's input speech? 50 to 60. So 55 plus 60 is 110 out already. Okay? It's a lot already. You've overshot. So fitting formulas, now DSL, all the fitting formulas are based on roughly half gain. So if the guy's hearing loss is 60, you're going to average, you're going to probably provide about 30. Because average speech being 50 to 60 plus 30 is an output of around 85. You can handle that. Okay? So this is why. That's why that stupid little formula, input plus gain is output, is the central cornerstone of everything. It's the cornerstone of compression. It's the cornerstone of fitting methods. And it's all because the dynamic range of the listener got smaller. The floor got elevated. The loudness tolerance ceiling did not change. With conductive loss, it's like an elevator. The whole thing went up. The floor and the ceiling went up. You always think of conductive loss as a plug in the ear. So when you're going out and riding the lawnmower, you're giving yourself a conductive hearing loss by wearing earplugs, and you're doing that on purpose. You want that, okay? A conductive loss is a plug in the ear, but sensory neural loss is a squishing of dynamic range. Therefore, hearing aids cannot amplify by the full degree of the loss. They basically amplify by about half gain. And then NAL has a certain wrinkle on that. DSL has a different wrinkle on it, but the spinal cord of fitting methods is basically roughly half gain. Cool? It's really important to kind of see that, or just always keep that in your minds that way. So now you're looking at WDRC for your typical mild to moderate sensory neural loss. And what's happening here? Oh, in this case, we're looking at a gain of 40. And that's linear gain. And always read that as maximum gain. This is the max. This is the what do you? And let's say this is at user volume, just kind of user volume setting. Please don't think this has to mean that you crank the hearing aid full up. Okay, just set the volume to wherever the guy's comfortable, whatever. Maybe the hearing aid doesn't even have a volume control. Some hearing aids today don't even have them. You know, the point is this. You've set the hearing aid strength with the hearing aid software. You've binked into NOAA. You've entered the guy's audiogram. You've chosen, let's say, Phonak or Oticon. Then you went in and chose the model of the hearing aid, and then you hit set. And the software sets the hearing aid. And it might look like, if the input-output function might look like this. Okay? And what you should read there is maximum gain at the settings given by the software. Maximum gain is for soft inputs, 0 to 40. And what is the maximum gain? What type of gain is that? Linear. That's where the maximum gain is taking place. And for inputs more than 40, less gain is taking place. Less. How much less? Well, let's figure it out. From 0 to 20, my output was 40 to 60. From 20 to 40, my output went from 60 to 80. Tit for tat, 20 for 20, 20 for 20, linear. From 40 to 60, that's 20. But here, I only went from 80, didn't go up as much. I only went from 80 to 90. Not as much. Okay, so my input went up by 20, my output went up by only 10. So 20 over 10 is 2 over 1. It's a 2-to-1 compression ratio. Can you see that the focus here is the floor? The focus is giving most gain for soft inputs and gradually less and less and less and less gain for louder inputs. So the focus here is raising the floor. What are you doing here? Imitating outer hair cell damage. Because this person has a mild to moderate sensory neural loss. And the focus being on sensory. Remember? Outer hair cell damage. Mrs. McGillicuddy, typical presbycusis. Like 90% of the people walking through your door, guess what they're using? WDRC. The focus is on providing maximum gain for soft inputs because that's what the outer hair cells used to do. The outer hair cells help the inner hair cells pick up sounds below conversational speech. So the outer hair cells did their work below 50 dB. The outer hair cells don't do anything past 50. They're not needed anymore. But when you've lost outer hair cells, now you can't hear until 50. Your ceiling is still 100, but you can't hear till 50. So what are you going to do? You're going to provide maximum gain for the soft inputs below 50, and then you're gradually going to put on the brakes. And if you look at this graph on the right in terms of its numbers, look at it in terms of its, I wonder if I've got that picture here. It would be typical to me not to have it. It would just dry, it would be absolutely typical. Let's see if I've got that little table, though. That table is very, very useful. You can just see, no, of course I don't have it because that would have been intelligent. So why don't I just go and pull that puppy up anyway and just show it to you. Okay, let's look at this guy right here that we did last week, and we'll just look at the little table because I really, here it is, look at this, here's that, beauty, I like it when things work. Look at WDRC on the right. It's the same story, just told in numbers. It's the same story as you looked at with the graph. So 0 in, 40 output, gain of 40. 10 in, gain of 40. At the knee point, low knee point, asterisk, gain is still 40. And then look at how the gain gradually decreases. Like Mrs. McGillicuddy slowly putting her foot on the brake, and the stop sign is way down the road, but she's just slowly putting on the brakes. So you can see that the maximum gain took place below the knee point, and then there was a gradual reduction of gain, 35 to 30 to 25 to 20 to 15 to 10. As my inputs kept going up, my outputs only increased by half. So the focus of this is not on limiting the maximum power output. The focus of this hearing aid is not, repeat, not the ceiling. So now we look at the cousin. Let's look at this guy over here. Go up to the top. And where were we? Let's look here. Now look at the left-hand graph. When you're looking at the left, this is the older type of compression. This was the first type of compression on the left, OLC. It emerged as an imitation of regular linear gain hearing aids. It emerged, it was the first type of compression to come out in the 80s, 1980s, and all hearing aids used to be linear. And remember, linear meant, and then they used peak clipping, like hard peak clipping. So it was like me jumping up and down, hitting my head on a cement ceiling, because they wanted to limit the maximum power output, and by gum, they limited it. And then the first type of compression, output limiting compression. Look at how flat the line is. It's almost horizontal. Not quite, but almost horizontal. So in a way, this is a close first cousin of linear peak clipping. Linear peak clipping, the next one on the line, output limiting compression. You can see that the knee point is high. The hearing aid is just providing linear gain for not only soft inputs, but it's also providing linear gain for average inputs. And then suddenly slamming on the brakes. So this would be the teenager in his dad's car, seeing the stop sign and slamming on the brakes just before getting to the stop sign. Not better, not worse, just a different usage, a different clinical usage. And for whom does the bell toll here? For whom is this compression intended? Severe hearing loss. So the person with a left corner audiogram or a flat hearing loss of 80 decibels, that guy's going to be wearing high power hearing aids, and he wants compression, but the focus of this compression isn't on elevating the floor. The spectacles of compression, like the homeland security of this particular compression is, we need to protect this client from further hearing loss. How are we going to do it? Instead of using hard peak clipping, we're going to use high ratios of compression. So going to our little table here and looking at the table, you could look at either the red or the gold here, doesn't matter. Either one, both of these are output limiting compression. Let's look at the red. Here you've got lots of gain, lots of linear gain, lots of linear gain, lots of linear gain, until you hit the knee point, the asterisk. And now you're saying, let's suddenly slam on the brakes. Gesundheit. And slam on the brakes, and now, whoa, wham, wham. Just down, 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 down. You just suddenly slammed on the brakes. Okay, back to our notes. Basically, you can read the notes, but essentially, they're all what we talked about just now. Effective OLC. Go with me right where I'm highlighting it here. High knee point means hearing aid provides linear, read more, gain for soft and medium inputs. High ratio means once the hearing aid goes into compression, it goes into a lot of compression. There you have it, right in the notes. The focus is on the ceiling, so that the hearing aid does not damage residual remaining hearing. It's a sudden limitation of the output to protect against further hearing loss. Output limiting was the first type of compression to emerge in analog hearing aids. It's a close cousin to linear peak clipping. You'd think I wrote these notes. Weird. So instead of limiting the MPO with peak clipping, you're limiting it with a high knee point and a high compression ratio. Less distortion. Commonly used for high power hearing aids. WDRC, on the other hand, think low and low. Low knee point, low compression ratio. The effect of WDRC, following the highlighting here on your screen, low knee point means hearing aid provides linear, read more, gain, but only for soft inputs. Low ratio means once the hearing aid goes into compression, it goes into a gentle degree of compression, just a little bit. A weak degree of compression for both average and loud inputs. Let's look at the graph again. Which hearing aid is in compression for more inputs? WDRC. See, the limiting is only in compression for louder inputs. WDRC is into compression from average and loud inputs. So it's a weak degree of compression over a wider range of inputs. The focus is on just what its name says, compressing a wide dynamic range into a smaller one. A unique type of compression. It tries to imitate the outer hair cells. Really, in all essence, it seeks to elevate the floor by providing linear, read greatest gain, for soft sounds below the knee point, and then providing a weak degree of compression over a wide range of inputs, from moderate to intense. WDRC came later. It emerged around 1990. And this is an important date to remember. And I would put a star by that, because that's when the proverbial crap hit the fan in our field. It is really important to realize that 1990 was almost like 1914, the war to end all wars. 1990 was a year that really changed the field of audiology, because that's when the knowledge of outer hair cells became known. That's when clinicians began to read, oh yeah, inner hair cells do this, outer hair cells do that. Oh, we didn't know that before. So now let's make a type of compression that imitates the outer hair cells. How are we going to do that? Use a low knee point, low ratio. Let's call it WDRC, specifically to imitate outer hair cells. Before that, in the 80s, people didn't know hair cells were hair cells. They didn't distinguish the difference. They didn't have, the technology didn't exist. We just provided linear gain with hearing aids for people with sensory neural loss, dang it. Also, 1990 was the year that otoacoustic emissions came out. OAEs, done by audiologists at Missouri State University, right around the corner from OTC. All right, they're studying otoacoustic emissions. And you should too. They are a byproduct of the outer hair cells working. They are actually the ear in reverse. Just like when you work hard, you sweat. Well, that's a byproduct. If a light bulb produces heat, that's a byproduct. The main purpose is the light, but heat is the byproduct. The work is getting done, but your body's making sweat. Ask Kelly when she was building her wall, okay? Basically, OAEs are a byproduct of the outer hair cells working their tails off. And they are actually a sound made by the cochlea, and it leaks out. It goes out from the stapes, wiggles the incus and the malleus, and actually wiggles the eardrum like a speaker, so the ear's producing sounds. You think, what? Yep, it's not tinnitus. But a probe in the ear can measure otoacoustic emissions.
Do we hear those?
No. Thank God. That's a great question. You know why you can't hear them? And I'll tell you why.
High frequency?
No. When you've got, remember the eardrum is fairly large compared to the footplate of the stapes. Mm-hmm. If you push your hand really hard again, do this little thing with me. Push your hand against your face really hard. Okay, now stop. Now push your finger against your face with the same force. That hurts. Okay? Pressure is force over an area. So your eardrum receiving force, that's converged onto the point called the stapes. So that increases sound pressure so that airborne sound can activate a fluid-filled cochlea. But when you're going backwards, you're going from the stapes to the eardrum. Now you're losing pressure. Okay? That's why you can't hear them. Thank God. No, and they're never confuse otoacoustic emissions with tinnitus. Different animals. Okay, otoacoustic emissions are actual sounds. Like you can, a probe, like a tympanometer probe actually measures them. And if you haven't got otoacoustic emissions, you haven't got outer hair cells. If you have outer hair cells, you have OAEs. Pardon?
Are there some pathologies that a person is able to hear those?
No, never. But it's
Oh, never. Okay.
no, never. But OAEs are used to test babies. They're used to test infants.
Oh,
Infant
okay.
hearing. They're also good to test liars. If someone's lying about his or her hearing thresholds, if the person's got OAEs, you know they've got pretty good hearing because their outer hair cells are working. Remember, outers die first. So anyway, it's a little off topic, but then again, not. Then again, not. Okay, well, let's finish today with a short discussion. I know the notes go way more than this, but don't worry about it. Just cover what we're doing here. Share a screen, and let's just look at adjusting. How are these hearing aids adjusted? Well, this is the easy part. Now we've gone over the theoretical part. How are these ding-dong hearing aids adjusted? Well, okay. Next one. Here it is. I'm going to keep OLC on the left. Okay, output limiting is on the left graph. Output limiting is the left graph here. I'll make it bigger so we really focus on the picture. How is it adjusted? By raising or lowering the MPO. You do this. You're the clinician. On the software, you're going to enter the client's UCL, or you may choose the maximum power output that you want the hearing aid to have. If it's 100 or 110 or 120, you pick it. Okay? And it's going to be basically, see the lines go up a little bit because you have still a little bit of gain. You got a little bit of happening. It's not flat like peak clipping, but it's still output limiting because it's fairly shallow. Okay? So basically around 120-ish, 115-ish, 110-ish, sort of, you know what I mean. Adjusting WDRC is a totally different matter. Totally. You're not concerned with the MPO because the hearing aid's weak. It's not a strong hearing aid anyway. What you want to do is adjust how much gain you want to give for soft inputs. How much do you want the hearing aids to imitate the outer hair cells? Do you want them to really imitate the outer hair cells or back off, Jack? Why would you want this adjustable? Well, if you had maximum gain for soft inputs, maybe internal hearing aid noise might become audible. Maybe the guy's got really good, I'll stop sharing here, maybe the guy's got excellent low frequency hearing. Maybe the hearing drops off like crazy. So the guy's hearing at 125 and 250 is really good. And then past 1,000, it goes down. Well, then if you have the maximum gain for soft inputs, you might get this problem. My hearing aid is hissing in quiet. It's giving maximum gain for soft inputs. So in dead quiet, the hearing aid's going, because internal mic noise is amplified, internal amplifier noise is amplified, and so the guy's hearing the crap of the hearing aid. He's hearing what he doesn't want to hear. He's hearing the fridge too loud. He's hearing anyway, so you might want to just, hey, I think I'll back off on that maximum gain. Maybe I'll give a little bit less. That's better. Yeah, that helps. Okay. So the TK control, they called that the TK control, threshold knee point control. That's what they called this adjustment. TK, 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 follow my cursor. Threshold knee point here, threshold knee point here, threshold knee point here. How do we want to change the gain for soft inputs? What was this for? WDRC. Output limiting, what are we adjusting there? The maximum power output. Okay, in a nutshell, that's the two adjustments of compression. I mean, one can go on ad nauseum, but why? Let's look at our notes and see where we are. So you can just read about it right here. MPO, first type of compression adjustment, been around for years. Effect changes the knee point and MPO. Yeah, it does. It changes the knee point and MPO. Have a look. Okay, it changes the knee point, knee point, knee point. But it really, the focus is on changing the MPO, maximum power output. there's the general gist of it. It'll scroll down here. There's no need to sit there and read all the notes. You basically have an idea. Here's an important rule for setting MPO adjustment. It's like the MPO control on linear hearing aids. Set it about 15 to 20 dB above the client's uncomfortable loudness levels, essentially. Number 2, a newer type of adjustment called the TK control. It was for WDRC, basically. Okay, here we go. Rule for setting TK. Set it as low as possible until the internal hearing aid hiss sound becomes audible to a client. And now let's look at the word low. What do you mean set it as low as possible? Look at the graph. Set the knee point as low as possible. Remember, as your gain lines go left, your gain is going up. So the lower the knee point on WDRC, the greater the gain for soft inputs. That's why so never get confused about low. Think, oh, that means softer. No, low knee point on WDRC means more gain for soft inputs. Here's where we can take comfort so that as budding clinicians, we don't need to freak out. Here we go. Here's what today's digital hearing aids commonly use both. Look at this. Today's digital hearing aids commonly use both. They use WDRC for soft to moderate inputs, and they automatically go into output limiting for louder inputs. That's cool. Same hearing aid. So we can now, instead of, and the way it used to be, you'd have to choose. I remember the days. It wasn't all that long ago. I worked at Unitron Hearing Aids, where Ms. Lynn Royer works a lot too, at Unitron. And I remember I'd have to choose the hearing aid. Okay, Ted, are you going to use WDRC? Okay, the client's got a mild to moderate loss. Yep, an order form, order WDRC. What type? Input compression. Okay, send in the order form. If I sent in the wrong order form, shoot, I got to change the whole thing again. Well, today, you don't need to. The hearing aids today, they're digital. You can make the hearing aid do WDRC. You can make the same hearing aid do output limiting, or you can let the software combine the two. So on the same hearing aid, you'll get WDRC automatically happening for soft inputs, output limiting automatically happening for louder inputs. So you, Tina, and Kelly, and the rest of the class are not sitting there messing with all of this on your software. You're not. That's why I say DNFO. Do not freak out. This may all sound really abstract. This whole several weeks that we've got may sound really kind of like, ugh, this is weird. Actually, it's the stuff that's happening underneath what you see on the screen on the software. But you still should know what it is. So if an audiologist comes up to you and says, do you know anything about WDRC? You'd say, yeah, it's got usually a low knee point and a low compression ratio. For whom is WDRC intended? For mild to moderate sensory neural loss. Good. Who taught you that? Oh, we learned that at OTC. Good. Because a lot of clinicians out there have IHS training 1 year. They don't learn this stuff very much at all. Okay, they know nothing, they don't know how to read input-output functions. And it's not like you're going to sit there doing input-output functions every day on Mr. Jones. No, you're not. You probably won't even look at them on the software most of the time. But if you have a question and you're trying to figure something out, you may elect to look at, and what's the input-output function happening here? Let me see that. So it's important not to be technicians. Technicians push buttons and they don't know why. Technologists push buttons, but they know why. And I guess that's the difference. That's why we teach this stuff about compression, and that's why there's a textbook on compression that you're using, because you learn a little bit more about the whys and wherefores. You learn about what's the difference between dB and dBSPL. And you'll know that, oh, dB stands for gain. dBSPL stands for input and output. Oh, how come? Because input is an absolute decibel value compared to 0. If I want to tell a house is half as tall as the apartment, I got to know where the ground is. So SPL is always dealing with a 60 dB SPL, 40 dB SPL. Gain, maybe the gain is 50, but it's just dB. I can give 50 dB of gain to a 10 dB SPL input. I can give 50 dB of gain to a 20 dB SPL input. Gain is relative, so it doesn't have SPL on the end. Who taught you that? Oh, we learned that at OTC. Good. So, and this is what we went over on session 1. I mean, but it's in my book too. You can pull it up in the book. dB versus dBSPL. Boom. Chapter 5. Real ear. You'll see it there. It's serious. So all these things are there. It's very important to know some of these distinctions regarding compression. But I'll stop here and go back to share screen just to highlight that the writing there. Today's digital hearing aids commonly use both. Look at the last sentence. If you look at the input-output function on today's digital hearing aids, it's going to look like a barn roof. And what do I mean by that? You're going to see 2 knee points. You're going to see linear gain, knee point, and then a second knee point, and then it's going to be output limiting. I'll show it to you. Linear gain, and then you're going to see a little bit of a knee point here with WDRC, and then from here you're going to see a second knee point. And then I'll draw it for you just to bug you, just to tease you, because I like teasing OTC people. Your input-output function is going to look like this. So linear gain is on the left, WDRC is between the 2 knee points, and output limiting is to the right of the second knee point. Cool. So just thought I'd tell you that. True stuff. All right. Have a monster face. All right, are we good? I'll talk to Lynn Royer about the quizzes and stuff like that. And, excuse me, and we will chat about it and get back to you all as a class. We'll probably send you out a remind or an email or something, or an announcement on the course, what have you. But either one way or another, you will find out. Other than that, this has been the session on output limiting versus WDRC. Next week, I will be lying to you more about something called bill and till, bass increase at low levels, treble increase at low levels, and we'll also begin talking about programmable hearing aids. Programmable hearing aids, which all today's hearing aids are. All digital hearing aids are programmable. So we need to look at what programs are and how they differ from each other, okay? Bill and till is the last of compression. And then we get into today's digital hearing aids and their compression, but you'll all understand it because we're just fusing stuff that we covered already. I'm just putting it all together. Okay, so next week, bill and till, bass increase at low levels, treble increase at low levels, along with programmable hearing aids. And we'll study how hearing aids have different programs and why, what they're for. Good enough? All right. Live long and prosper. We'll see you when we look at you next week, okay? All right. All right.